Alright guys, so here's your review for your Trig quiz. This is coming up on Thursday this week. So make sure that you watch the video through. Even if you got the right answer, try and watch through it just to make sure you did it the correct way. Sometimes there are multiple ways to get the right answer that just kind of are by luck and not necessarily by the right way to do it mathematically. So just check and make sure you did it the right way. Overall, we're seeing a lot of people do super well on this first page, but I'm going to go through it anyway, and I'll get to the back page eventually. If you need to skip through, that's fine. First of all, let's get our labels figured out. So this is our opposite, this is our adjacent, and this is our hypotenuse. Okay, now those things don't change just because you have two variables, so don't panic. You're just going to do two equations. That's all that's really happening here. So basically just pretend like the y isn't there, and you just use x. So I'm going to use it, let's go green for this one. So if I need to do x, then I always say I have to include x, and then I'm going to use the other number that's there. So that's the adjacent hypotenuse. Remember our SOHCAHTOA. Adjacent hypotenuse means I'm going to use CA, which is cosine. So cosine of 30 degrees is going to be equal to adjacent over hypotenuse, which is 4 over x. Now, since I'm solving for a side, I'm going to be using the regular trig, not the inverse. So I'm going to put this over 1 and start my cross multiplying. And I'm going through this a little bit faster because this is very, very much review. If you're struggling with this already, you probably need to go back a few lessons and get some of the notes taken care of and maybe do some of those practice problems. So x times cosine 30 is written over here. 4 times 1 is over here on this side. That's what cross multiplying does. My goal is to get x by itself though, so let's get rid of that cosine 30 degrees. Divide on both sides, and it's going to end up getting rid of that. Okay, now I've got x on its own over here. If I plug this into my calculator, should be 4 divided by, and then 30, then cosine equals. If you're using one of mine, if you're using one of yours, it's probably going to be different than that. But no matter what, you should get 4.62, and I rounded it to the hundredth spot just because that's what we're used to. Okay, so there's one of them. Cool. Now, you really got to be careful with this one to make sure that you solve for both variables, because you do have to do both to get the full credit. Now, I obviously want to include y if I'm going to solve for y. Can't really use x. I mean, I can, but I don't really like to use one that I've solved for just because in case I'm wrong. So let's use the one that's already there. If I'm going to use adjacent and opposite, then that's going to be TOA, which is tangent. So now to solve for y, it's going to be tangent of 30. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So y is going to go on top this time and 4 on the bottom. I'm still solving for a side, so it's still just regular trig. Put it over 1. Do your cross multiplying. Y times 1 is just y. So this one turns out to be a nice easy one. And then we have 4 times tangent 30 on the other side. If you plug this into your calculator, make sure you're multiplying. This is not a division one. This is division. This is multiplication. Very different setups. If you plug it in correctly, make sure you do tangent 30 first, then multiply by 4. If you do 30 times 4 and then take tangent, you're going to have a very bad number. You should be getting 2.31 for your answer. Okay, feel free to rewind and check that again if you need to hear some parts of it over. I'm going to move on to number 2. Now, same thing again, start with our labeling. This time we're looking for an angle, so kind of keep in the back of your mind, we better be using inverse at some point. I'm going to put the letter A here just because I really don't like using that silly question mark. So I'm looking for angle A. Now, opposite from angle A is the 6. The hypotenuse is here because it's across from the 90, and then that makes this our adjacent. Again, very basic, very review. Circle the two sides that you're going to use. If you need to rewrite SOHCAHTOA, you can. Remember, you can use the phrase some old horse caught a horse taking oats away if you can't really remember the SOHCAHTOA in your head. Some people have trouble using the sounds to remember it, which is fine. Opposite adjacent make tangent, which is the TOA. So tangent of A, because I don't know what the angle is this time, equals opposite over adjacent, which is 6 divided by 12. Well, my goal is to get angle A by itself. I have this tangent stuck to it, though. So how do I undo tangent? Inverse tangent. That's where the inverse has been coming in. Anytime you're solving for an angle, you need to use inverse. Okay? Angles, inverse, sides, regular. What happens because of that is that these guys cancel out their adios. Out of the way. And we have angle A is equal to whatever inverse tangent of 6 divided by 12 is. Now on your calculator, if you're using one of mine, make sure you did 6 divided by 12 equals. You have to hit the equal sign. Do not just do 6 divided by 12 and then start doing inverse. 6 divided by 12 equals, should have 0.5 on your screen, and then shift or second, and then tangent. If you're using one of your own calculators, you can just go in order as you see right there. No matter what, though, the decimal answer is 26.57. The directions say to round to the nearest degree, so please make sure you follow directions and answer with 27 degrees. That would be your final answer on that one. Okay, moving on to number 3. This one is also an inverse. How do I know? Because I'm looking for an angle. I'm going to label this angle A again. Like I said, if you want to use the question mark, you can, but I'm just really not a big fan of them, and I can't get the program to change it. That's okay. Opposite of angle A is 8. This is the hypotenuse. And here is our adjacent side. Well, I have nothing on adjacent, so I can't use that. I'm going to use opposite hypotenuse. If I look at my SOHCAHTOA, that means opposite hypotenuse is the SO, which is sine. So sine of A is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. Opposite is 8, hypotenuse is 14. Now remember, like I said, if you're looking for an angle, please make sure you're using inverse. It means you gotta hit second or shift on your calculator. You're trying to get rid of that sine, which is why we do inverse sine on both sides. That's all I'm doing in this step. And what happens then, just kind of like number 2, we get rid of those guys. And some of you have been able to kind of skip from here to the answer, which is okay, but I still want you to remember why you're doing that. Don't forget that the reason you can do that is because of this middle step. Again, type in 8 divided by 14 equals, then hit shift, then sine. If you do it correctly, your angle A, the decimal is 34.84. And when you round it, it rounds up to 35 degrees. Okay, doing pretty well so far. All right, so that's kind of the basic review. That front page is just give me the triangle, do the math. Give me the triangle, do the math. Now flip over to the back side. If you looked at the directions, it does specifically say to earn full points, you must include a diagram, show your work, and have a correct answer. That means you have to actually draw a dang triangle. Okay? So Caden is launching a rocket to hit Preston, who is standing on top of a 30-foot high dirt hill. He seems like a great friend. If Caden locks Preston in his sights at 35-degree elevation, how far will the rocket have to go before it hits Preston? Okay, so now as you can see, I've already done all my underlining, getting the key features in there. And let's draw my picture in. There's my hill. And Mr. Preston is standing at the top of it, waiting to get hit with the rocket. This does not mean that I approve of hitting your friends with rockets, by the way, so please don't go home and tell your parents that Miss Crawford said we could go hit people with rockets. No, this is just hypothetical. But let's say that you did want to. Okay, so we've got the rocket, and I'm going to label this P for Preston and K for Caden, just so I know who's who. So Caden's got him locked in his sights, and this is kind of where our triangle comes in. Okay, if you were getting kind of stuck on figuring out where the triangle is, that's where the triangle is at. He's up on the higher top of the hill, so he's at the top of the triangle, and it kind of makes this little right triangle there. Hopefully the 30 degrees is pretty easy to place. The hill is 30 feet tall, so that's the vertical rise. Now be careful with your angle of elevation. Remember, we talked about it has to include a horizontal line. Okay, so from the ground up. Okay, well, can't use this one. That's got vertical and diagonal. It's got to be this line, which means it's this angle. Okay, so there's our 35-degree elevation. Like I said, you have to use a horizontal line to put the angle in. And now we have to actually place the X. Well, we're looking for how far will the rocket have to go before it hits Preston. Okay, well, is the rocket traveling on this line, or is it traveling on this line to hit Preston? Okay, well, it's traveling along the hypotenuse. That's its direct line of sight, so that's going to be X for us. Okay, well, that's really the hardest part. If you can get the picture figured out, now it's just a matter of doing the math. My angle is here. This is my opposite. This is my adjacent. Check your 90-degree angle. That means this guy is the hypotenuse. Now it just becomes like the front page. Once you have the numbers and the picture drawn in, you just got to do the math. Remember your SOHCAHTOA, O and H are so sine of 35 degrees is going to be equal to opposite over hypotenuse. Remember, it's always so, opposite hypotenuse. So 30 goes on top, and X is going to go on the bottom. And since we're solving for a side of the triangle, not an angle, we're going to do regular trig. Make sure you're not using inverse for this one. Put that guy over 1 and do your cross multiplying just like the usual. 30 times 1 is 30 on one side, and then we have X times sine of 35 on the other side. Well, my goal is to get this guy by itself. I want X alone. So get rid of sine of 35, divide it on both sides. Cool, now we're getting X by itself. Okay, well, if I do my calculations correctly, 30 divided by sine of 35 comes out to about 5.23, and make sure you put your label. It is feet. So the rocket is going to travel about 52 feet through the air to hit poor Preston in the face by his good friend Caden. So kind. All right, last problem. This is the one I really, really want to make sure you guys are good on. So you are standing at the top of a cliff overlooking the lovely ocean view. Wouldn't that be nice right now? I wish we were at the ocean. All right, ignore that for a second. Sorry, I had to rewind because I went over my time. Okay, so we're right here. We've got the ocean, and now we're sketching in our boat and whatnot. So while I'm drawing this in, whoops, I don't want red for my ocean. That's creepy. While we're drawing this in, remember that your angle of depression has to hit a horizontal line. We've got you looking at the boat here. Our 120 is pretty easy to spot, so I'm just going to slide that in right there. And our right angle is here. So here's the triangle that we're looking at. Sorry if you get a little sketchy with the cutoff there. The 54 degrees is really the tricky part. You have to have a horizontal line and then an angle going down from there. Well, here's the problem. Right here we've got a horizontal line, this bottom of our triangle, going up, but that's technically the angle of elevation. This can't be the angle of depression because this is a vertical line, so that doesn't work either. Well, that means, kind of like that weather balloon problem we did in those practice pages, your angle of depression is actually outside the triangle. Here's your angle of depression. Okay, now if you remember correctly, there's a couple ways you can go about solving this. You can use this triangle and make a second 90-degree triangle and just solve from there. The 120 would, of course, flip over on the other side. You can also remember the fact that angle of depression and angle of elevation are congruent to each other. So if depression is 40 or 54 degrees, angle of elevation is also 54 degrees, and you can solve from there. You can also calculate this angle. These two have to add up to 90 degrees, so this one would have to be 36 degrees, and you could solve from there. Okay, I'm not really going to focus on that one, though. So it's up to you which one you pick, as long as you use one of them. Make sure that you solve for X, how far the boat is from the shoreline is this edge down at the bottom there. Okay, if you do the top triangle, it would be this one up top. That would also be X. Okay, No matter what, your answer should be 87.19 feet, though.